Road and bridge, man.
I went upstairs, sorry.
Greatest problem with roads is we can't find our way around our own building.
I tried to go upstairs too and wondered why everybody was coming down.
Ready? Okay, it is 9:33 and it's time on our schedule for our city county meeting. And so we're going to call this meeting to order. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh and let him roll through whatever he has planned for today.
Thanks, Commissioners. Appreciate it. It's time once again for our city county meeting. It's an opportunity to get together and talk about issues and open lines of communication. On this agenda, we wanted to talk about the impacts of growth on infrastructure. As we all know, that there seems to be a massive increase in growth in our area, and so we wanted to address some of that. I went back and I looked through, I just thought, hey, what if I go back and look through the conditional use permits over the last few years? So I went back to 2018, and in 2018, there was 13 CUP applications. Some of the highlights there were Spirit Lake City, wastewater treatment plant expansion, Lynn Scott batch plant application came through in 2018. And then there was an application for communication tower. So those are some of the indicators that there's growth and that they're expanding infrastructure to serve some of that growth that's happening. 2019, there's 7 CUP applications. It's like 19 was a good year. It was a great year. One indicator as I went through those, there's a lot of storage facilities and those types of things that also might be indicators, but 2019 Priest Lake Library expansion, obviously seeing growth and thinking, hey, we need to expand the library. So there's some indicators there. 2020, 11 CUPs, a couple of RV parks, employee housing up at Priest Lake, again, communication towers. Applications and additional indicators that we're starting to see growth. There's a picture from an application for some of those communication towers. You can see that there's quite a few up there and applications for quite a few more. Obviously, they're spread out across the county. This is just one site, but just to give you a visual reference when we're talking about communication towers and putting those towers up. This is
That's Baldy.
I think it is, yeah. 2021, 21 CUP applications to date. We're halfway through the year and we are well beyond what we've seen halfway through this year, what we've seen in past years. Other indicators to the growth. One of those, as we saw in the garbage picture, is solid waste working on a collection site. That picture from earlier, if we go back here, this is out of Renko Loop. A little bit of a problem there. Solid waste CUP for the new Midway collection site out there in McLean. There's a real need and demand. I'll let Bob Howard talk more about that, but 2021, multiple applications for communication towers, RV park, condo units, things that we just haven't seen a demand for over the last 4 years. That we're seeing a lot more applications for these types of things that would be indicators of a need for infrastructure to service or support some of the growth. And that is our topic of conversation today. I'm gonna let Bob come up and talk about solid waste for a minute. He's got some other meetings, so we'll let him go first, and then Uncle Steve's gonna get up and talk about Road and Bridge and see if we can pull a few words out of him. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thanks, Josh. So a few numbers for volumes of trash. In 2016, 2017, we transferred 42,000 tons of trash from here to Oregon to the landfill for waste management. In 2019, 2020, we transferred 44,397 tons. Already this year, year to date, we're at 30,000 tons as we are here today. So that's a huge increase for us. So the wood waste in 16-17 was 1,309 tons. We're up to 4,523 tons year to date today. Tires, 162 tons in 16-17. Year to date, as of this year, right now is 192 tons. So the volumes of everything are increasing rapidly. So year to date, tonnage increase is around 12% of last year, and year to date traffic counts about 6% increase. So a lot of the challenges we have is space, especially for like the metal and wood products. That take up a lot of volume and space. We're probably going to be having to put 2 side tents on at some of our busier sites because of the volume of vehicles and volume of trash. Waste management has staffing issues and equipment issues. They can't keep up with the amount of trash that we're generating. So those are their issues. Hopefully with the passing of the bond election and we make improvements at Colburn, we'll be able to manage that trash better, take larger volumes, and transport it out here a lot quicker. And another project that's not included in the bond election is at some point we're for another tipping for west side over at Apple Hill, which will balance out some of that volumes of trash we receive from both sides of the county. Also, we're looking in the future for recycling and composting to help take some of the weight off from transferring it to landfill Oregon, which hopefully would save us some money. But that takes space. So space is an issue we have also in all these projects. That was just a quick update of kind of where we're at, what we're dealing with. But yeah, and then out of state trash is a huge issue in Washington. We're getting a lot of Washington people bringing trash in, and it's hard to control and hard to identify because people, they're not truthful of where they're coming from, and they have all sorts of tricks to try to just take their trash and take it at a local cost versus just out of county cost.
And apparently it's cheaper than dealing with Washington because they'll even pay the fee, whatever it is, and still bring it. So the problem is that we must not be charging them enough. And we don't want more trash. We're struggling to deal with the amount of trash that the residents of Barton County are. Yeah.
Priest Lake, we have all the Washington people that own seasonal residences of Priest Lake. So on Fridays, they bring their trailer full of trash out of Washington to our site and use their local Barton County sticker to dispose of their Washington trash. So those are issues that we're trying to come up with solutions for down the road. Yes, sir.
Well, I was kind of curious, as we start to see these issues, what's the run-up time, like Renco Loop, that site was a problem, started to see issues and problems there, and then to identify a new site, purchase property, go through the CUP process, what's the timeline? Like, what's that taking you? How long have you been?
Well, I've been looking for a site to replace Renco since I took this job in 2016. To find someone that's willing to, first of all, nobody wants a collection site in their neighborhood next to their house.
Not in my backyard.
Everybody wants it to be convenient, but nobody wants it in next to their property here. So, and Commissioner McDonald, we've all been working very hard to find locations for sites, and it's just it's been very challenging. So
I think from the time that we actually found the site, well, actually, if you include the time looking for the site, it was probably a couple of years.
yeah. So, it takes quite a while.
And we had to go through planning.
Yeah, those guys are.
Yeah, those guys.
But that doesn't year.
Bob, do we charge enough for, out of county? I mean, is that a legitimate question? Because,
We charge, if you're out of county, it's $500 a year per sticker.
right, but what if you just bring waste to a site? You're not gonna charge some a $500 sticker.
No, I forget what that fee is.
It depends too
Talked
on,
about yesterday.
Yeah, I talked about yesterday, I didn't bring the fee schedule with me, so.
Right,
Also
but
depends on how they're
isn't-
bringing it in,
Isn't
if
it
they're
a flat
bringing
fee? Like, we charge $5, whatever we charge, but that's if you're throwing away a garbage bag or you're throwing away 3 yards.
Mhm.
And, I mean, so, I mean, shouldn't it be a sliding scale? And I mean, in that one area that should be looked at?
We've actually discussed not even allowing anybody from out of county dumping in Bonneville County, period. Like Kootenai County does.
but one of the big run-ups too is the commercial people that come out of the Washington dump. And we do charge them by volume, but realistically, we should be charging by weight, but to have that, we have to have certified scales. And they're not giving those things away, unfortunately.
And Bob and I actually had this conversation yesterday, if we could maybe get scales, we're gonna have them at Colburn. If you had them at Idaho Hill, and if you had them at, Dick and Sheet. And if you're from out of county, out of state, those are the only places you can go, and we weigh it all. But I don't know, we don't have I was like, let's just cut off all the out of county, out of state. But a lot of the people that own these secondary are out of state. And that is a pretty good number on our balance sheet, you know, for knowing that you're going to have X amount of dollars. You might be cutting your nose off.
Right, I think we did something for one of the waterways studies that on Lake Ponderay, that 35% of the property on the shoreline of Ponderay appears to be local residences. The other ones are either out of state, secondary homes.
I'd say that's accurate on most of our water.
Yeah, in fact, it might even be higher increased,
Probably is a pretty.
as far as out of state goes.
You know, so you just get into some really interesting discussions about how to, you're not trying to just charge them, you're just trying to make them go and dump it in Washington.
Right.
If they produced in Washington.
Well, but it's also covering the cost of it all. I mean, it's amazing. They're gonna haul all their trash up to Priest Lake, and we have to go to Priest Lake to pick it up and bring it back here. That's just crazy.
And with the
It
increase-
truly is.
Increase in fuel, that waste management costs go up.
Yep.
So
Do you see, you know, as you've gone through this process, do you see places where we as the county could, or different departments could speed things up or give quicker response to the issues as they pop up?
I mean, as far as the process.
Yeah.
So actually planning was pretty painless and a lot quicker than it has been in the past for us. So I was here
Totally
when,
not good.
well, I was here when the previous director, Leslie Marshall, we did the Blanchard site.
Yeah.
It took some time. So this was a whole lot. quicker
It was the
process.
agreement with the property owner that was the most,
Yes.
that moved it along.
Yeah, negotiation is what took the time, and then,
Yeah.
the title work and all that stuff, because title companies are busy, and you have to wait in the queue until it's your turn. So. But that's all I have. Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, $500 is nothing if you're commercial.
No.
Yeah. That's like,
Well, they do nifty things, like
basically in Washington.
they'll have magnetic signs on the doors of their trucks, and they'll take those off.
So Bob, one more question, is the building waste, I had a builder say that it all has to come up here now?
No.
They can go to Idaho Hill, and
Idaho Hill and Dickinson.
maybe they're getting told something different, like, you know, like painted wood and stuff like that.
And this also can go to Duford and Blanchard, because we have We have wood roll-offs for those materials.
They said, wow, that's a real pain to drive all that stuff all the way up there from Priest Lake. I'm like, I don't think you have to, but
That's
I'll
not true.
check into it.
If they're being told that by one of our staff, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Steve.
I'm busy.
Gotta get him up there before he falls.
I know.
Oh, nudge him a bit.
Well, Steve's getting to that age now. It's hard to stay awake during the day, so.
Not nap time, though.
I resemble it.
It's a family tradition. My dad used to be able to fall asleep while he was standing at a podium giving a sermon in church. It's really interesting looking at what the growth does, and it comes across in so many ways on the road system. One of the things, the first thing that really comes to mind is just the fact with all of the construction that's happening with growth, where you see construction traffic and where it's putting traffic on the roads and where construction crews are coming and going heavily morning and afternoon. These are people who are usually slightly late to work. The construction jobs are out of town. They're driving rural roads. They're in a hurry. They have no consideration of anybody around them. They're frequently not too familiar with the roads. They're not driving very safely. And it just really starts there. It's just a true imposition to all neighborhoods. They're parking on the streets. They're parking on the roads. They're parking because they're trying to work on a construction site where there's not off-site parking for the construction crew that's there. And that's, you see that literally in every road you're driving around in Bonner County. And in some of the neighborhoods where we get into suburban interface in county road systems, it's really quite noticeable where there are multiple construction jobs going on right at this moment. And you drive in on those roads and you just have people and equipment and it's just parked absolutely everywhere. The volume of traffic, of course, is just increasing in every road, I think in Bonner County, in every instance, the inconvenience that comes with that. The other thing that we're finding is there's a great deal of growth that's happening on the gravel road system, of which there's some almost 400 miles of gravel road that we maintain. And you're just finding that with the volumes of traffic, both the steady increase of residential traffic, but also the construction traffic that's coming with it, is it just making these roads more and more and more a challenge to maintain.
And a much greater expense.
Yeah, I mean, with our mag chloride, but the roads that we don't mag, we mag some 250 miles of road or something. But the roads we don't mag just are almost impossible. And along with that, the speed of traffic, something that I noticed that ties into all of this growth is also the cost of housing. And I've been out several times in rural roads, and the speed of the people driving those roads in congested conditions with no regard for anything around them is really quite interesting. And it made me start thinking about, I looked at some of these vehicles that were driving atrociously rude and recklessly, and I looked at the vehicle and that car doesn't even look like it belongs out in this neighborhood. But I think one of the conclusions I drew was with the cost of housing, some of the substandard housing that's further from town is probably what approaches affordable housing. And so you have people living in places with a distance from town where they don't want to live to start with. They don't like the length of drive they have to make, and they're driving very impatiently to try to shorten that drive time. And they're truly a hazard to everything that's in the neighborhood. the speed of traffic then starts becoming a safety issue for accidents that we're seeing happening in the road system, the irritation, the safety of older residents who can no longer safely pull out of their driveway on half the rural roads in Bonner County. You've got somebody in your tailpipe so quick you just go, holy smokes, where'd that person come from? And we do have lots of older rural residents that have a lifetime.
Couple of them right here.
Yeah. I look in the mirror in the morning, right? And they're just not used to this changing pace of life. And these are all just impacts that are happening every single day on our road system. The expectations of service are remarkable with our new residents. And particularly those residents who are buying homes and building homes on gravel roads for the first time in their life. And not that I want to chastise our local high-quality real estate professionals, but they are remarkably remiss or completely negligent in, or blissfully negligent in not making people aware of the fact if you're on a gravel road, that is a gravel road and it's going to stay a gravel road. It's been that way for a long time and you need to live with it. And there are conditions that you should expect. We just find people who absolutely are just astounded and rudely insistent that we are going to do something to fix the gravel road that they chose to buy property on. And it's another level that has really impacted and it will continue to impact both the road department and the commissioners, I think, for years to come. We maintain 680 miles of road. I have not ever truly metered, but I suspect we own more than twice that many miles of privately maintained public roads. And this is a whole system of residential development in Bonner County that is going to continue to be a nightmare. And it's because we don't have our road crews. We are basically the referees in land disputes. For example, to begin this week on Monday morning, I was dealing with a county road, privately maintained, that has 4 residences on it, and I spent an hour. My first hour of Monday morning, I was in a fine mood. 1 hour on the phone between the residences of a county road that has 4 houses on it. And you just find yourself in this position on a regular basis that you're being a referee in local land squabbles because of the maintenance of the road that is county road.
Yeah, every spring I get probably a dozen phone calls. Why isn't the county plowing, pick one, bow and arrow? Or I said, it's a public access, privately maintained. Well, we weren't told that when we bought the property. So
Right.
you got to read that title document.
Right, conflicts of use. This is going to be a growing issue as we start to have more infill and more density in the rural areas. The roads become recreational conduit and infrastructure for walking. I mean, it's not uncommon. I was going up a rural road and here were 2 people walking their babies side by side up a hill around a curve, blocking a lane of traffic. When I had to go around them, I was clearly in the other lane of traffic going uphill around a curve. And had something happen, had another traffic car come around that corner and I was just going, how insanely unsafe is this? And I see this all the time. I drive the Sago Road and you've got joggers and you've got bikers and you've got people towing boats and we've already had one person clobbered there from a long wide load swinging around and just knocking somebody into the ditch because they weren't aware of what they were towing. And we've got people towing 40-foot camper trailers and 30-foot boats and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the length of their trailer behind them. And we've got issues where people want to ride their horses on Sully Road and Culver Road. And these are the roads that people are wanting to use for recreational pursuits, running, jogging, biking, walking. And so there's going to continue to be, and as we get more and more residents, that's just what people tend to want to do. They tend to come from environments where they could use the road system as a recreational pursuit.
Where they have sidewalks.
You and Jeff's been here long enough, you might remember, I don't know if Dan can remember, I don't know how long but you used to see bumper stickers that said, "You're in North Idaho now, calm down."
Yeah.
Maybe we could make a brochure and give to all the realtors, when they sell a piece of property, to give them a little brochure.
Well, I definitely think that's
You're in North Idaho now, calm down.
one of the rubs is, it'd be great if we could figure out how to get the realtors to manage expectations for the new folks coming in, especially if they're moving in from an urban area and moving out to a rural area. Because that's where a lot of the
There's a
problems.
lot of them that are less than fully honest with people they're selling.
Well, and I for 2 years
No,
made
you're
an
in the
effort
banana
to,
belt, we get very little smoke.
well, I've made for 2 years, I made an effort to connect with the realtors, to talk to them about rural roads and the county road system, so the realtors could be more aware. And they never, ever got back to me to schedule. The realtors were not interested. They weren't interested enough that I ever got on a meeting agenda. So,
I can probably help you with that because they're actually looking, the Realtors Association is looking for update meeting on things, and I'm happy to help in putting together a panel, and we'll come and talk about what you want, but it's gonna be a panel of who all needs to be part of that.
I mean, I'm happy to participate because I think realtors don't carry their own water when it comes to informing people that are moving into Bonner County what to expect. And the other one, I think the commissioners are going to be dealing with for years to come now with this growth and the infill is the request for expanded service areas, extending our road to Bone Arrow, for example. But I mean, when you have numerous areas, we've got Old House. I mean, you go through road system after road system after road system, and you start to look at the banks of mailboxes on these roads, and you've got 30 mailboxes going up a road. You go, holy smokes.
Where there was 4 2 years ago.
There may be even one.
And this is all over Bonner County, and the question the commissioners are gonna end up, they're gonna be wrestling with this question for decades. But at what point is there enough of a tax base of a road that the standard answer Bonner County has given for many years is you knew you were buying on a privately maintained gravel road, and that's where you chose to buy. But at what point does that answer itself not quite be valid when there's enough tax base that's on that road that you go, well, they are paying, you look at their contribution overall to the road and bridge levy, and it's substantial enough collectively that you go, is that really truly a valid answer? But I mean, it's one, I think that these are just things Bonner County is going to be dealing with, but they're all impacts to the road system.
Several years ago, this guy, it had been like 8 or 10 years ago, I had an interaction with a new resident. After that interaction, I said, we need to have like a 2-week mandatory class when you first move here from somewhere else. Here's what Bonner County's like. This is where you move. Slow down.
Generally, when I
This is what's gonna start happening at the end of September.
speak to the chambers, and I go out quite frequently to Blanchard, get yelled at. I always bring that up, is that, you've moved to a rural area. You're in the sticks now. The county's not here to hold your hand. We'll help you the best we can, but you're on your own. Figure it out. Talk amongst yourselves. And they said, well, we want more fire coverage. And I said, and you can have it. You just have to tax yourself at a higher level, and Spirit Lake Fire or whoever will bring up that level of service. The county has nothing to do with that. And they're like, what do you mean the county has nothing to do with it? I said, we don't have countywide fire. Anyway, so, I take the time to explain it to them. They don't necessarily like it, but
it needs to be done, is to, they truly don't get it. They don't understand that the county is not gonna drop everything and race out there and, you know, we'll do as much as we can, but we're not set up to rescue you.
Well, it's part of that expectation thing where they move here. A lot of folks will say we moved here because taxes are low. But here's the following services, how much they add. Those don't come for free. You know?
We moved here for personal freedom. Well, we give you lots of freedom in the road system.
This is what freedom looks
You're
like.
free of our service.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think these are all issues that I deal with regularly, and we're just gonna see. But the safety issue and the conflicts of recreational use on our road system and the impacts that, you know, sadly enough, it's gonna increase. The trauma of accidents and serious accidents and deaths are out there, and you see them in the summertime all the time.
And I do remember two different bumper stickers, and one of them was, you're in Bonner County, act like it.
Yeah.
And the other one was, don't California. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very.
And that's too late.
Yeah, I remember that one too.
Yeah, I still get a chuckle out of the people that are demanding more striping on the roads. It's, you know, a lot of them live on gravel roads. I said, well, first of all, how do you stripe a gravel road? And you have to learn how to drive. You don't know which side to drive on.
You can use brake paint off.
Yeah.
I'm looking, I saw two creases on bone.
Oh,
It's gonna
really?
be, yeah, it's gonna be great when they hit the mud.
Oh, yeah. And when you start getting those mud boils.
We leave a few of those out there just to remind everybody. We should let Jennifer talk about their growth issues.
Yeah, I think we should. It's something we all share.
The pain is real.
Hey, Milton, are you gonna pull up that map you pulled up the other night at the North Idaho Way meeting? It shows where the growth's happening. It's pretty remarkable. It's everywhere. And not in the big chunks. There's not concentrated areas of growth. It's spread out all over the county.
So this will help you panic a little bit more.
I mean.
Yeah, I'm afraid of it.
Short timer.
Yeah, hit the enable editing and then, that yellow
It's the white
bar.
button on the top in the yellow band.
Right smack in the middle there.
Go to the right, Mark. Now go to the right. Go.
Yep,
So Josh won't be working for IT anytime soon.
yep, click on that.
That was me,
Okay, you.
Oh, that's you?
showing them where it is.
You see it now? See where your cursor is?
I don't even know what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you got it.
Go up.
Now, yeah, now go to slideshow and present.
Thanks, Jason.
How much longer you got, Josh?
About an hour and a half.
Today.
He's in no mood for it. So this is the one you want to film?
Yeah, so this is the mapped BLPs so far this year.
To date.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, just this year. So, yeah, you saw the number, 722 BLPs as of last Friday.
And that's fiscal year?
No,
No,
that's
just calendar.
calendar year, yeah.
6 months. Build application permit, so that's everything.
Right, that's
It's not,
additions, sheds, shops.
yeah, it doesn't
Yes.
include the exempt structures. These exempt structures would add another 120 to that number. So, and so then you see the bigger circles, those are the ones where there's 2 or more BLPs. So we require a BLP for every structure. So if somebody does a house, a garage, a shop.
Yeah, or two, somebody did an addition and then put a shop up or garage or something else.
But to Steve's point about, roads, that's where we need them.
I think it's most interesting.
That's where we need it. Yeah, pretty much all over the place.
Yeah, it's not consolidated to one spot.
But the point you made the other night was good, that a lot of them are off of major arterials.
Yes.
Highways, major county roads, although we do have the occasional folks that are moving way out in the boonies.
You know, something that is interesting are, and the ones that aren't getting VLPs, but the number of people who are moving in and preparing to live in RVs and camp trailers and
Yeah, we require a permit for that.
Cars.
Yeah, we do require a BLP for placement.
well, right, require but receive.
And that was, you had a number, it was a couple years old, it was like 400 properties you thought had RVs on them.
Oh, yeah.
They were living
Yeah, that's-
RVs now.
Yeah. Mhm.
More than that now.
Yeah. Once we get our imagery from GIS, we'll be able to.
It's out there.
The best one I heard was the person that came in to buy an ice fishing shack for a winter home.
Oh, really? Wow.
That
Ready
happened
for
last
some cold
fall.
weather.
Is that over in the
Better than
Pittsburgh area
that.
by any chance?
Yeah, North Forty,
Never able to install it.
I think.
So those sheds, like Montana sheds or whatever, I meet at least 6 to 10 of them every morning headed
Yeah,
west.
I just-
It's like, whoa.
it's called employee housing.
Yeah, I don't know where they're all going.
Pretty safe.
Well, yeah,
Oh,
We
yeah.
can find we can find a storage unit anywhere around here for my daughter.
Mhm.
So I just ended up
I'm
buying
shocked.
one of those
The single's
sheds
got a
just to put in my
gazillion.
place for her stuff.
Well, it's that way with everything, storage units, RV parks.
Yep.
I mean, you can't get into an RV park around here unless you booked it, 6 months ago.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Steve.
Well,
Milton, do you want to say a few words?
No, you got it there. That's,
So then let's open it up.
Why don't we ask Jennifer to speak a little bit about the impacts on Sandpoint?
Yeah, it'd be great to hear from what you're seeing.
because all these guys are shopping,
They're all headed
coming to
to San Juan.
Sandpoint for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at and we're seeing it, if you look at the traffic counts on Fifth Avenue there at Fifth and Larch, we're back up at traffic counts that equal what we had prior to the byway going in. So you saw once the byway came in, that dropped, those numbers dropped down about a quarter of what they were previously, but we have all the traffic on the byway, but now we've restored those traffic counts on Fifth and Larch. So the traffic in town, we're definitely seeing the impacts. We're seeing the impacts in terms of service infrastructure for us, for police. Pretty consistently, I get a report from the chief every week with a summary of all of our calls, the volume of calls, the types of calls, the major incidents that we're having. And in terms of calls for service, we have been at summer level calls for service now for about 3 months. So we're looking at having to add another police officer onto the force next year. And it's going to become a real challenge this summer because we're at those numbers now. We're not at summer levels. So we'll have to see what happens with our response times and things. And it becomes obviously very challenging for us and impacts the sheriff to some extent too, because we'll see the volumes go way up in the summer, but it doesn't make any sense for us to staff up to a higher 3-month level. But that's where we have to watch year round kind of what's happening and look at staffing up. We are starting to take a look at growth into the ACI, and we've committed to getting engaged in those conversations. A lot of our challenge right now and why we haven't moved forward with that is it becomes a discussion around our utilities. On our utilities front at the city, honestly, historically, we haven't planned for this kind of growth, and we didn't plan for growth into our ACI. And so we have master plans, have adopted a new water master plan. We've had a recent master plan for our wastewater treatment plant. And on that front, we're into design build for a new wastewater treatment plant starting next year. So we will see that come up.
Construction next year?
We will be in construction probably in the next 24 to 36 months. So that is underway, but what has not happened relative to our utility systems is a hydraulic study of what really we have capacity to manage within our distribution system. That has not occurred since 2007. We're getting it underway now. But that becomes the challenge for us, is both with our own infill that we're experiencing within city limits. If we are to look at any growth outside of city limits, really how much can our utility distribution system handle? So we're trying to get that going, but that's not a fast process. And so those are the challenges we're experiencing on the utility front. We're still in conversations and have a meeting coming up with Kootenai Pend Oreille Sewer District about one of the options for them to connect into our system and our wastewater treatment plant to address their capacity needs moving forward, as well as that being an option rather than them building out more infrastructure on their end. I think we've seen the request for the lagoons. I think that's still the path that they're going down, but there could be a hold and a release through our wastewater treatment system. Otherwise, really for capacity, they're going to need to build at some point a plant like what we're building. So we are in discussions with them about connection. We have the preliminary engineers report on that. There's a lot more vetting that will need to happen, but we are in the conversations about that. Most of our agreements with the rural water districts come up the end of this year. So we're the water behind Siringo, Edelweiss, North Side. So we're going to need to revisit those agreements. We're going to be undertaking a rate study for our water and our sewer. Our rates haven't gone up in about 8 or 9 years. So that will be a challenge when we're not even keeping up with inflationary with the rates, but that's the rate system that had previously been adopted. It's becoming a challenge, honestly, with the rural water districts, because similar to the rural roads, rural water districts build to rural living standards. That's not a fire flow standard. And I'm working with our adjacent cities on this too, because cities are responsible for ensuring adequate fire flow within their city limits. That's why we do all of the service within our city limits, but there maybe has not been as much understanding about that with our neighboring cities because they haven't had historically the density. And so we've got agreements in rural water districts that within their service area, they're building out within a city limit, the city's limits, but then can't make fire flow standards. So we recently had a development up in Pend Oreille where we had Northside wanting to serve the residential development, but then with their infrastructure couldn't meet fire flow and wanted us to provide the fire flow. So we literally would have two mains running adjacent to one another, which makes no sense for anybody. That was a difficult conversation we've had recently where I had to explain we're not in the business of serving fire hydrants. We're in the business of water service in our water utility. But as rural water districts are facing financial pressures and maintenance costs for their systems, one of the ways that typically they address it is through growth. But now we have this conflict in our urban areas. If they're growing in the urban area, by definition, they're in an urban area and they're a rural service system. So that is a serious conversation that we've got to get figured out.
Yeah, I've been shocked at the traffic. I mean, like you said, 3 months ago, I haven't seen traffic here that we normally see in the summer.
Yeah.
Every time I go home down Fifth, I'm like, holy crap.
Well, I feel better now after this end of the problem there.
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, good, your problems are bigger than our problems.
That
That's awesome.
school's not even out till today. Today's the last day.
Yeah, and we've seen the impacts of that this spring too with the warm weather that came early. We don't have lifeguards on duty yet, and we've had,
And
we're
it's already
full down
filling up.
at City
Yeah.
Beach. We have traffic counters we've put out earlier this week at our boat launches to kind of get a handle on what our usage is looking like. And I think you'll see us undertaking a conversation probably going into this fall relative to even that infrastructure and what are we doing for locals using services and what are we doing for out of area using services. So our fee structure, and particularly in a park system, probably looking at some shifts in our fee structure on a pay-to-play model is something you're going to see us have to undertake. And again, that's not necessarily looking at the locals, but the impacts of the traffic coming from out of our area and the locals paying for all that infrastructure.
Yes.
Just maybe one quick question is, we've started this city county meetings, and we started talking about ACI from the city's perspective. Has this been a good thing? Are there suggestions about additional meetings, or is there things that we could change from our side to help move some of those things along?
I think probably to get some things moving, we'll need to have some offline conversations, but just speaking for Sandpoint, and the mayor and I have had conversations about this. We've had conversations with the council members. I think speaking from a Sandpoint lens only, we found these meetings to be productive. I've appreciated the county holding these meetings, and it felt like this is an opportunity for some good dialogue. I think the challenge, and it's come out within these meetings, the challenges we're facing are complicated. They're really complicated when we get into the cities too, because they're a city and county coordination issue and a city-city coordination issue as well. And just from Sandpoint, even being the largest city, having the most staff as compared to the other cities, much like the county, we're maxed out. I mean, the growth pressures on us staff-wise we're feeling it throughout our whole entity. We've had some turnover on planning staff too. So we had our new city planner join us about a month ago. So getting her up to speed, and we're hopeful that we'll have our senior planner position here filled in the next week. That will give us kind of more capacity. But capacity definitely has been a challenge. Even on the utility side, we've just added a utility business manager position because the business of running our utilities is complicated and it's bigger than our city limits, and our staffing is stretched to the max. For building permits for us, we issued as many building permits last month as we did the second quarter of last year. So that's our, peak building season, and we're doing in a quarter's worth a month. We're up higher than that for June. So, we don't have the scale of county-wide, but for a city, our scale and the growth numbers we're seeing are the same. We're also challenged a bit with understanding and perspective of some of the developers in our area as to what's required to do a development. We've got one. I actually have to leave for a meeting here in a minute on a developer that has a development agreement with us and wants to just start building homes and doesn't have a final plat. So we have one lot. And obviously on the planning side, you understand the issues we're dealing with. And I know you're experiencing some of those same things too, as it's gone from single lot development to, subdivisions and those types of things. Sophistication and understanding that now you're in a whole new ballgame with different rules. There's a learning curve with that too.
Yeah, I think the thing that's affecting us is the sewer districts and the cities that have sewer are, for the most part, they're maxed, and so it's pushing people out into the county, and we're still not seeing big subdivision developments. I mean, the last subdivision we had was probably 19 lots. So they're not big subdivisions, but they're 5-acre lots. And so, yeah, we're still.
It's a challenge in dealing with the districts, honestly, when the districts, they want to continue on. And we're not in a position necessarily we can only push the envelope so far.
Yep.
We're not in a position to force something that is outside our city limits. There will be conversations when we're the water behind something. Certainly that can affect a different conversation, but when you're dealing with jurisdictions who want to continue and they want to expand, but you've got this juxtaposition of, again, you're rural and urban, and there isn't an acknowledgement or maybe even an understanding of that, it becomes real challenging to, and so it's a PR issue for us. That's, and the more, I think the more we can have conversations about that, and there's an understanding. I don't know the residents necessarily understand that. They're receiving water, so they're receiving water and it's fine, but this issue of, especially on the water side, of capacity of systems, the ability to maintain the system. What about fire flow on the system that you maybe didn't have to think about when, you don't have the density, your neighbors are a good distance away, but now suddenly they're subdividing and you've got neighbors and more infrastructure in there. We better be talking about fire flows.
Or flow at all, because I mean, when you start, the system was designed to say do 50 houses and now there's gonna be 150. It's not gonna be it's gonna be somewhat adverse because it's gonna just take away from the people that are already there. Yeah, it's just doesn't have the flow, but, because I don't think you're built 8-inch main to the edge of, you've got complications inside your own system that feeds those systems. That, yeah, it's a big deal. So what is the cost of water and sewer in Sandpoint? Just, monthly cost?
I can't tell you off the top of my head what our average is, and I have to say our water rates that were previously adopted, in my mind, and we hear from residents a lot, it's pretty complicated because they were trying to promote conservation, so you start tipping higher rates. And then in summertime, you really see a significant tip on that. And then sewer is based on your base water utilization. So we take your lowest months of the year, we'll take like January and February, and we'll base your sewer rate off of that.
By usage.
Yeah, thinking that the water they're using is going into the sewer.
Yeah, I usually pay about 150 a month for the whole package, right?
And you're three
Water,
bedroom,
sewer.
two bath.
Yeah, 4 people.
Water, sewer, and garbage.
Yeah, water, sewer.
So in Priester now, it's up to 113 for water and sewer. But they do have, I think we have 3 or 4 bonds that, bond repayments. But the systems in Priester were pretty robust now. They've both been rebuilt. We're about to build another water tank that will really, they're at about 30%, 35% of capacity, both sewer and water now. So, they're sitting in probably, but once that's found out, then they're getting inundated with people wanting to do stuff. So.
Yeah, on the water side, what I can say is relative to our ability to provide water, and then obviously, as you have growth, it requires revisiting upsizing, but in terms of our capacity to provide water, our plant, we're capable of providing water. We could provide all of Bonner County. We have that level of capacity on our water system. On our wastewater system, we don't have that level of capacity, and what we're doing right now is a demonstration project to we're replacing the laterals in a section of South Sandpoint to look at the impact on our I&I, to see if we can get our I&I better under control, because that directly influences the size of plant that we have to build. And if we can get I&I under control, then it reduces costs for our sewer ratepayers in terms of the size of plant that we have to build. We do have a bond on our sewer plant, and I know there's been a lot of conversation on, we've just been kicking the can on rebuilding wastewater. Why aren't we doing it sooner rather than later? there was a decision that was made about 2.5 years ago with the Citizens Advisory Committee and by the council that we were going to hold off on building to try to get I&I under control. We've been very actively doing projects, including this demonstration project. But in addition to that, to pay off the existing sewer bonds, so we didn't stack debt on debt for our ratepayers. Our existing bond will be paid off this year. That's why then we're moving next year into design build of our plant and really starting to refine those costs. But a decision will need to get made relative to Kootenai Pend Oreille Sewer District and connecting in, so we know what size plant if we're addressing that as well. And there could be some real win-wins with them connecting in because we do have such substantial I&I problems due to the infill and infiltration due to the poor quality of our soils, older laterals in the area. It's a real challenge with our soils here and the lack of stormwater infrastructure too, frankly. We need to get that handled, but we have to be able to accommodate that runoff of I&I and flows through our system in the wintertime. So having that flow come in other times a year, it's kind of a win-win because a wastewater treatment system, much like a water treatment, I mean, they're built to do their jobs. And so if we have times a year, we're seeing these massive drops in terms of what we're treating. It's really problematic actually for the ongoing maintenance and the health of the system.
So is your system directly influenced by stormwater? I mean, not like, you have stormwater that actually is plumbed into it?
In some cases, because again, the quality of our soil, some pumps that are getting used, we've got roof drains, and we have done an audit of that where people had connected their roof drains into the sewer system. Then we've got failing laterals going in, and so broken laterals, and then you get the high water levels in our soils, and now they're just running into the wastewater system. And the problem with that is we have to treat everything that goes into that system. So you have clean water in there, we have to treat that too.
Right. You have to go through the whole process to get through it.
And getting citizens to understand these issues, as you know, is
A little tougher job.
Yeah, government's a complicated thing.
Thanks, I think that's, thought we had our problems.
Yeah, like I said, it could be worse.
Jennifer, have you guys ever had conversations about building moratoriums?
Actually, that's been floated around a couple of times in terms of
Probably not popular.
no, and particularly with our challenge right now, we're all facing with, affordable housing for our workforce. So politically, I don't know. How do you really have that conversation?
Well, it's one of the things we struggle with. We constantly have people that say, they literally want us to put gates up on all the entrances to the county, and it's just not reality.
It's illegal.
We saw, what city was that in Idaho that did a moratorium in the city?
Caldwell just
Caldwell.
did it.
The problem with that is what happens is then it drives everyone into the county. So it doesn't alleviate the issue. It doesn't solve the problem of growth. It just transfers it somewhere else.
Losing across the road.
So I was actually at that training and they talked about this very thing. And boy, you better have legal footing before you do it. You have to have an emergency. You can't just say, hey, we're getting way too many people. We'd really like to stop for a minute and catch up. And you can do it for I think it's 90 days, and then you can do for up to a year, you've already looked at it. But and it has to be identified as, this is the reason it's an emergency. These are the things you better be on pretty strong.
Water and sewer overload would probably be a gut treat.
Well, you just have to prove it.
Yeah,
Yeah, show it.
and you can probably do it with sewer in Sandpoint, but not water. They've got plenty of water.
But they're still allowing connections, and what's your capacity because you got DEQ looking over your shoulder and they're saying, you've got so much, right? And this is what you can do.
We don't we don't have a capacity issue at all on the water side, but again, it is
Sewer.
sewer really, that's not DEQ, it's just overall the capacity of our system. We know we have the capacity for the infill within our current city limits. The growth outside of city limits starts to be where the question comes into play. Not to mention the fact that our growth outside of city limits, now we start, we've had people approach us about annexation and wanting to do subdivision development at Baldy. And we got to get across railroad tracks there, which
Yeah,
gets
sewer.
real expensive. So we're not under there right there with either water or sewer, although we've got property right on the other side of that too, and are getting an inordinate amount of pressure, I would say, from our employers, especially in the area, to look at what we're doing with that property and could we accommodate some housing, some infill housing there, some workforce housing, can we partner with businesses? So I know the mayor's interested in really pursuing that conversation further, so
But DEQ isn't saying,
no, it's not coming from DEQ.
but DEQs have to have will serve letters. I mean, you can't, you can do the permits in existing, but you can't approve a subdivision without a will serve letter from DEQ.
Right, but if we have the ability to serve,
Right.
in terms of our capacity, that's not been an
It's
issue.
only on certain days if it's really rainy and snowy and crummy, right?
I mean, we're within, it's not an issue of us being in compliance with our permit, it's a capacity issue. So we've actually done a number of improvements on wastewater treatment that, we're well within, we're not violating.
No,
Even though there's been a lot of hubbub out there about violating discharge into the waterways, we are not. That's been resolved for quite some time and we haven't had any violations. So that's not an issue, but it's capacity. You go down to wastewater treatment plant and when we have a rain on snow event day,
Right.
and we are full and it is running, our volume's very high. We're getting it all treated before it's released, but again, on those days, we predominantly were full of clean water, really, but now we're having to treat it.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, everything's off.
I think that's everything I had, commissioners.
Okay.
Anything?
Anybody else want to chime in with anything? Seeing nothing, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at